I'm excited to share with you a wonderful roast that I did with an Ecuador Sidra coffee to a very light roast. This is the Kaleido M1 that I've been working with for some time. I have done a couple of roasts here on my channel with this roaster. Overall, I'm very happy, but it does have some things that I had to get used to. I'm not used to the smaller drum capacity, and so it's a 200 gram maximum capacity, and I was doing roasts with a capacity of 180 grams. And I ended up roasting this Sidra coffee in there, and the beans swelled over 50%. The drum got really full, and it became a very difficult coffee to roast. So for drum roasters, that's something to really watch for and to be considering when you're roasting. It caused me to think about the density, the size, and the moisture of the bean. And so in my last video, I kind of did a deeper dive into that and talking about how it impacts our choices on what we do when we roast a coffee that has a high or a low density, a high or a low size variation, and a high or a low moisture content. So I would really encourage you to check that video out because it has some great foundational information that I shared with you. Today, we're going to put together a roast profile for the same coffee, and we're going to roast it to a very light roast level, taking into consideration the things we learned about this bean in my last video. So let's go ahead and do that right now, and then we're going to get right into the roast. Today, we're going to roast a Pablo Ponce Finca San Pablo Ecuador Sidra washed coffee from Cafe Imports. And we're going to do this in a light roast style, and generally what that means is lighter roasts generally roast with a shorter total roast time. So we're going to have a total roast time that's going to be shorter than some of my normal roasts for, say, a medium or a medium dark coffee. And the reason why is because we aren't going to have as long of a development time for this coffee, because we want to highlight the origin notes and some of the acidity in the coffee. So we're not roasting it as dark, and we're doing all of this because we want to accentuate or highlight, as I said, all of the delicacies and the nuances of this coffee. The first thing I did was think about the density, the size, and the moisture, and I ranked the density score from a 1 to a 3. Highest density is a 3, a medium density is a 2, and a low density is a 1. So I've got a worksheet that actually shows the ranges. You can see it here on the screen. And I end up categorizing the density of this coffee. And I did the same thing for the bean size. This is a large size bean, as I mentioned in my previous video. It scored a 3, and the moisture content is average to a little below average for moisture content, and so I scored that a 1. When you add this score up, it's a 7 out of 9. So what does this score represent? And Mike, why are you even scoring these? Here's the answer. It tells me that I need to apply more than my average amount of heat to this bean in order to get the heat to penetrate the bean and to move the bean along. So what I'm looking for is thermal inertia. I'm looking for enough heat momentum that I can drive the heat to the center of the bean and move the bean, the roast, through the roasting process in a time frame that I have set for my goal of a shorter total roast time. So here's my profile. I'm roasting 150 grams of this Sidra coffee, and the reason why I'm doing that is because I don't want to fill up this roaster full of beans. I know the beans are going to swell in size, and I plan on using more air in this roast, and I want to have as much convective heat transfer helping me get that heat to the center of the bean rather than bean to bean contact. So I'm using a smaller, a lighter charge weight of 150 grams instead of 180 grams like I was doing earlier with some other coffees. And then I'm going to be applying more air as we move through the roast, and you'll see that once the roast gets started. Our charge temperature is going to be 160 degrees Celsius. Our turning point I'm expecting to happen around 50 seconds. My dry yellow event is going to take place around 4 minutes and 30 seconds. My first crack time is expected around 8 minutes, and the total roast time I'm expecting to be around 9 minutes and 15 seconds with a ending drop temperature of 192 C. Now, I zipped through that really quick, and we'll talk about that more during the roast, but this is my light roast profile. I have a shorter than typical dry phase, and I know the bean can handle the heat because it's a high density bean. I'm trying to create enough momentum to carry me through the roast, and I also want to be able to have enough momentum to get a nice crack started at first crack, but not too high so that I don't have high temperature increases as I enter development. All those things are important and have brought me to this point in creating my profile. So what that ends up being is a 4-minute and 30-second dry, a 3-minute and 30-second estimated browning phase, and a 1-minute and 15-second development phase. And I really focus on my times in each phase now more than I do development percentages, like phase percentages. I think that's helpful, but when you start to move the total roast time, then 20% of something changes, it makes a difference. So I'm focusing on my times in each of my phases, my time to first crack, and my total roast time. Before I start this roast, I want to get your feedback in the comments, and I want you, if you're interested in giving this a try. I'm interested in you using the worksheet that I'm using right here that I just modified, and I want to get your feedback. I want you to try to score your coffee and see if that helps you make decisions on how you may approach this coffee when you roast it. Applying more heat up front in the beginning of the roast, and or preparing yourself for maybe some of the roast behavior. If you've got a really high density bean and it's a large bean, you have a potential to have more energy released from the bean, which could cause a greater flick and then crash as you are coming into first crack. So it's not only about our charge temperature and our heat application during the earlier part of the roast, making sure we have momentum, but it's also about preparing you for what could happen later in the roast as well. So yeah, I want your feedback. I've got a link in the description. I'd like you to check that out. It's free for you to click on that link and download the worksheet, and I would love to hear your feedback and your thoughts on what you think about this. And if you've already been working in that kind of a mindset where you're analyzing your moisture, your density and bean size, and you're making decisions based on that, share that in the comments as well. I really would love to hear that. Let's get started. All right, 150 grams of Ecuador Sidra coffee in the roaster, charging the roaster at 160 C. We start the roast, and immediately you'll notice, as usual, the bean temperature starts to go down quickly. This is totally normal. Most of you know that. This is the natural experience that we have because the probe is this 160 degree temperature, but the coffee beans are room temperature. So you're going to see this drop, and then you're going to see the curve plateau, and this is called turning point, and we're reaching turning point here in just a second. And here we go, we reach turning point at 45 seconds. All right, now I have got my roaster set up so that I have applied my power, and we're at 70 for power right now. I may be making a few adjustments. I'm going to watch my rate of rise, which you can see launching here on the screen. And I want to make sure that I have enough momentum, enough power applied to get a nice boost in the momentum of this roast, and I'll be making minor adjustments along the way. With a burner setting of 70, and I've got an airflow of 60 right now. So I want to talk to you about the airflow. I chose an airflow of 60, which is pretty high But I chose that airflow because I wanted to be sure that I had good convection. But here's the danger. If you choose too high of an airflow, then you may be driving hot air out of the roaster and not have enough energy to keep up with that. So you may be dwindling your momentum by using too much air. So I did some tests and I'm comfortable with a airflow of 60, and my machine is able to keep up producing the momentum that I need. So that's where we're at with this, and that is why I've made the choice of that airflow. As the temperatures climb, then I'm going to have more convective heat. So we're going to start to see some good convection starting here in probably another, maybe 15 or 20 degrees Celsius. We'll really start to see pretty close to color change is where I'm excited to have this airflow. In the meantime, I've got enough heat that's keeping the roast going, and I've got less bean-to-bean contact because I have fewer beans in the roaster and I have more air moving around the beans. That's going to help promote the roasting process. So I'm really excited about that. All right, now one of my goals is to have a fairly consistent rate of rise decline throughout the entire roast. My biggest issue or my biggest concern is having that happen from the dry event down to through the rest of the roast. I'm not really too concerned about what happens during the dry phase, but I want stability in the roasting environment, and so I am starting to make some temperature adjustments. I've already gone down 2 steps in my power at increments of 5. So we're at 60 right now, and I am trying to start out my dry event at a rate of rise where I have enough momentum to push me through the rest of the roast. So I'm looking at the color of the coffee. We're super close, and I'm going to be calling the dry event here in just a few seconds. And my rate of rise is really where I want it. It's at a good place. I'm not too high of a degrees per minute increase, and I'm not too low. So I've got good momentum and I'm in control of my roast. And the dry event just happened at 4 minutes and 34 seconds, just a few seconds off of my prediction. So I'm really excited about that. I'm really in control of this roast. That is exciting. And I had many roasts before this with this coffee where I was not in control. So if you're frustrated because you have just had situations where the coffee isn't doing what you want it to do, don't feel bad, because that happens to everyone. This coffee took me quite a bit of practice to be able to get to this roast level here. So this is not the first time where I just do a single roast and it turns out really good. This roast took a lot of work for me to try to figure out. So bean size was a really big factor. Now I'm starting to step down my heat, and with this coffee, because the moisture is on the lower side, it's maybe a little below average, I am losing moisture from the bean, and so the heat penetration is getting towards the center of the bean, and I need less energy to keep this coffee moving forward. So I'm bouncing, or I'm moving down my heat application. I'm at a 35 right now, and we haven't even got the first crack, and I can do that with this coffee even though I have a fan of I've actually bumped my fan up to 70 because I've got plenty of energy. This coffee seed is starting to give off a little bit of energy here as we approach first crack in about a minute and a half. This coffee, the behavior of it right now, everything seems to be going well, and that's because I'm not making a lot of drastic changes to my air, and I'm not making a lot of drastic changes to my heat all at one time. I'm stepping them down in increments, or I'm increasing my air in increments. Where it's going to get a little dicey is towards the end of the roast. I'm going to have to do some crazy things because there's going to be this big energy release at first crack. This is a large bean, and there is going to be a lot of steam being released from the seed when it cracks open at first crack. So I'm going to be, like I just did right now, I look at my heat. I turn my heat down to 10 right now because there's enough energy starting to be released from the bean that it's almost coasting. The roast is almost coasting. And I'm also doing this because I know first crack is going to be coming up here really soon. My target time is 8 minutes, and so I am trying to prevent the flick and prevent the crash. So you can see I just increased my power setting because I didn't want the crash. I'm trying to control my rate of rise as we get really close to first crack, and I was expecting it to happen around 8 minutes. We're a little bit late on that. I'm starting to hear a couple of cracks. And it's when I hear subsequent cracks, then I go ahead and mark first crack. And here we are at first crack at 8 minutes and 12 seconds. And now I'm bumping my power settings back down a little bit so that I don't have a skyrocketing rate of rise. So you can see that little hump that I have in my power settings, and that was to avoid a crash and avoid a flick. All of that. So it got a little ugly, but now we're in this development phase. I've got a nice strong crack. That's great news because I know that as more beans crack, I know I've got more heat penetration all the way to the center. The moisture that is remaining in the seed is now being evacuated. The airflow is at 75, so I'm making sure that all of that is moving out along with the smoke because I really want a nice clean coffee. I don't want a lot of smoke, and I don't want this moisture hanging around. So I've got a 75, and we are at 9 minutes and 10 seconds, and I'm getting ready to, I'm looking between a minute and 15 seconds for development, and I think it's time to drop the coffee. Here we go. And there it is. It dropped the coffee at 9 minutes and 22 seconds. So that last part during the development phase at going into first crack was pretty crazy. And this was some of the challenges that I had with this coffee specifically, with all of that heat in the bean and then being released at first crack. But ultimately, we got really close to the goals that I wanted to have. And let's take a look at the beans themselves. It's kind of not really good lighting at first glance. The beans on the outside, they definitely are on the lighter side. Whether they're a light roast, a super light roast, or a light roast on the outside, I'm not sure yet. But it looks like a pretty light roast coffee. I'm excited about that. We will do the weighing and the color analysis on this to see if it really is a light roast coffee, which I'm pretty confident that it is. The Sidra bean itself is known for having a tendency to get a little darker on the outside, and part of that is because of the size of the bean itself. So here we are, and we're doing this score, and we've got a medium light is what is being measured on the whole bean itself. So, you know, I'm saying that this is a light roast coffee. The very outside of the bean is a medium light bean. That's what the sensor sees. But when you take a look at this coffee up close, it's definitely barely medium light. It's very close to the lighter side of that. But when we grind the coffee and we grind it fine so that we can get a good particle analysis, we see that it's a very light roast. So I would be worried that maybe this coffee could be underdeveloped, and we'll find out when we taste the coffee itself. But you know, ultimately, I'm happy with the progression of crack, the rate that it was taking place. I know that we've got a coffee that's not underdeveloped. ultimately it's going to come down to the taste, and if we taste some hollowness, some woodiness, then we'll know that I went too light. This coffee smells delicious. It's definitely got a fruity note, a fruit forward note, so I'm really excited about that. This ended up being a 10.7% weight loss. Now, that might seem really low, but remember, we had a little bit below average moisture content in the seed itself. If this was an average moisture content green at, say, 10.5%, then this would be an 11 or 11.2 for a moisture loss. Next is going to be the taste. I roasted this coffee about a week ago and I had a chance to taste it. Because I paid attention to the density, the size, and the moisture of the green bean before I roasted it, I was able to accomplish a beautiful roast that has some nice floral notes that you can smell as the coffee sits in the cup. And there is a beautiful orange juiciness that is in this coffee with no roasty notes and no real sour or bitterness. So the brew, I got the brew down. I used the Kaleido. I've got some pictures of that here. I would love to hear your comments about my density, size, moisture measurement that I used to determine charge temperature and your initial power settings. I would love to hear your thoughts about what I did with that, and if you try it yourself, I would love to hear if you had success or if you had questions about that as well. Let's start the discussion there. I'll have the blank worksheet ready for you for download here in the description. You just click on that. Basically, it's my updated worksheet, and then I've added the density, size, and moisture section in here for you to score your coffee. Let me know how that works as well. Thanks for joining me today here. I really appreciate you being here, and I hope you have a great week roasting. We'll see you next time.